we go. All right. So today, this is our week 10 check-in on Monday. I am not going to host a Tuesday check-in this week because I've got a medical thing that I need to see to, and also I'm going to try to vote. And from what I understand, it's kind of an ordeal right now. Like it's it's like back in the day when I grew up at the tail end of this, but if you wanted concert tickets to like a really popular concert or whatever, you would have to like camp out. You'd have to like camp it. Even when they used to sell the tickets in like Sears and stuff, you'd have to like get in line, and wait for the ticket. So it's kind of like that with voting. For early voting, it's like people are waiting 3 hours or more in some cases. So I'm just basically going to make an attempt on Tuesday after I get this medical procedure taken care of in the morning. But anyway, and I do encourage you to, number one, to register, number two, to vote, regardless of your political affiliation or whatever. It's this isn't a political science class, but representative government only works if everybody participates. Otherwise, it's a very select few making decisions about who is making decisions for everybody else. So it's the people that we have in office then are not representative of the people. So in any case, if you are eligible to be registered and you can register, then do register. And if you can't, and I would recommend voting early even under the present circumstances, as opposed to trying to vote on November 3rd, because that's just going to be crazy. However, on November 3rd, there is a polling place on campus in the Mays Center. So if you are on campus, you can vote at the Mays Center on November 3rd. Again, though, lines and everything else. Okay, so this week I'm introducing the profile project. I've already got a substantial amount of stuff in the week 10 folder on that I put up last night. So we're starting the project a little bit behind. So what I've done is I've extended the due date for the first draft out a week. So the first draft for this will be due, I believe I have it now written as the 14th of November. Okay, so you've got a little bit of time, but understand that part of this project, a major part of this project, is actually going to be interviewing somebody. So, over the next week or week and a half, what you want to do is you want to make arrangements, for that interview. Okay, so let me back up a little bit. Okay, so, and again, all of this is already on Blackboard in the folder. I actually created a video where I break down the assignment sheet and I talk about it and kind of go into depth about what the profile project is and so forth. So that's available to you. I've got 5 sample essays up, and I also will be putting up my own reading through of those 5 essays as well. But anyway, so the concept of the profile project is that you are going to be undertaking an investigation, right? You're looking for something. You're looking for answers, right? Okay, so you're going to think about something about which you have burning curiosity. And I mean, people try to say, oh, well, I'm not curious about anything. I don't care about anything. That's complete bullshit. It is. I'm sorry, it is. If you inhabit a human body in this life, you're curious about something. That is the nature of what it is to be a human being. It may only be that you're curious about, like, what the difference between Kraft macaroni and cheese is and Velveeta, but you're curious about something. It's the nature of being human You know, it's then again, you know, we can get into existential questions like human according to whom and according to what, but in any case, right? So now there's a caveat here. If you're in the learning communities class, which is section 2, paired with Professor Vega, you have some restrictions on what you can choose to investigate, because if you're in that class, your profile project is going to feed directly into the final exam for his class, which is a presentation. So you're going to make a presentation based on your profile project, in essence, okay? So because of that, your profile project needs to be career-oriented, needs to have something to do, if you're in Professor Vega's class, if you're paired with that class. If you're not, you know, it's wide open. But if you're in Professor Vega's class and my class together, right, in the learning community, it needs to be career-oriented. And you also need to cite 3 sources, scholarly sources, according to the techniques that you've learned in his class with regard to that. And I can post some additional resources as well as we move forward, but you will need to do that. And so you'll need to have a works cited page, and you'll need to have in-text citation. That's only if you're in Professor Vega's class also. Okay, but in either case, the idea is that you're going to come up with a question, you know, and you're going to, that you really want an answer to, that you legitimately want an answer to. And it can be career related. It can be related to something that you've always been curious about in terms of something that's gone on in your family, experiences of the people around you. It can be, you can even write about an artifact. And what I mean by artifact, that, you know, I'm talking about in the academic meaning of that term, meaning, which means object, basically. So it can be an art object. It can be like, say your grandmother had like a special watch or something, or you know, or a brooch or blouse or something like that. Blouse. Nobody keeps a special blouse. What the heck am I talking about? Okay, maybe, you know, maybe your great grandmother or something had like had like her wedding dress saved, or something. I don't know, but like a important item, right? That has a bit of history to it. You can ask about that item, right? And what that you know means, and how that came to be in your family's possession, and so on and so forth, right? And that lends itself to some cool stuff because you can put pictures in there and so on and so forth. I've had people write about their friend who wanted to go into music, right? Write about their friends who produce music, and they put like, you know, snippets of music in there and stuff like that, or you know, so there's any way to go about, you know, any way to go about this. But the idea is you're going to identify somebody that you already know that has information about this thing, because we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here, right? I'm not asking you to go out and, you know, pound the pavement virtually amid COVID and so forth and be like, oh yeah, you know, I'm doing this project for school. You don't know me, you know, please let me interview you. I'm not going there, right, with this, okay? This is somebody that you know, and you know, just to back up a bit, even if you're doing something career related, there are ways to go about it that you know, that don't necessarily have to be conventional, right? For example, if you know you're interviewing, if for example you want to go into law enforcement, the obvious choice would be to interview somebody in law enforcement. However, you could get a really awesome perspective from someone who's a spouse of somebody in law enforcement, or someone who's a child of somebody in law enforcement, right? You know, what is it like to have your spouse, or to know that your spouse or your parent is in imminent danger? You know, you could get a really awesome perspective that way. And that's still career related, see? That would still fit that. And again, if you're not in mine in Professor Vega's class, it doesn't have to be career related. It can, but it doesn't have to. So and you'll see when you look at the sample essays some of the variety, right? In any case, and I have this broken down by number. I actually did it by the numbers in the assignment sheet to try to make it as kind of straightforward as I could. What you're going to do, you're going to obviously, so you're going to identify the person in your life who has this information, right? Who is a source of information for whatever it is that you're trying to investigate. And you're going to profile the person, right? You're going to interview the person, okay, based on the questions that you're trying to get answered, okay? And you're basically going to write up that interview. Now, when I say write up the interview, you are not going to, you're not going to quote the interview verbatim or anything like that. No, you're going to engage sections of the interview that are the most significant, that are poignant, that have meaning, and you're going to talk about that. And I'll get into more about, like next week, for example, I'll get into more about integrating source material and stuff like that, and really into sort of the nuances of that, which is really one of my favorite subjects to talk about in English 1301 and 1302 is sort of the subtleties of integrating source material, right, and the implications thereof, right? So we'll get into all that next week. But right now, just getting you the basic idea. So you identify who the person. First of all, moving back even a step further, right? So you identify what it is that you want to investigate. You indicate why is this important to you? Why do you give a shit? Okay. And then, and this is a key point, and I make this point both on the assignment sheet and also when I am, on the video on the assignment sheet as well that I put up. Indicate to your audience why they should care. And so that's where audience ties in, right? Because again, just like with the narrative, to whom you are writing, to whom you're speaking, that determines a whole lot, right? Because you're trying to entice the folks to enjoy what you're writing, to get something out of it, to identify with it. So, to whom you're writing, that's going to be fairly important. But why should your audience care about this? What does this have to do with them? In whatever way. And so after you've identified that, then what you'll do is you'll identify the individual, and you'll identify what expertise the individual has in that area. And by expertise, I mean, well, obviously, if it's a career thing, obviously they have expertise in the career field, or like the example I gave, say if you're talking about law enforcement, for example, or military or firefighter or something, they're a spouse of somebody with that career. Even, you could even interview a spouse of like a lawyer or something, because, for example, I know of someone who a relationship ended for them because their significant other said, quote unquote, I don't want to be married to psychology, because the person that I'm speaking of was so entrenched in her career, and so all about her career. And sometimes you have to be, particularly early career people, to advance. The dude did not want to be, quote unquote, married to psychology. So anyway, but anyway, you backing up again, you identify what expertise the person had, what qualifies that person to answer the questions that you are asking, what qualifies that person to have expertise. Then you identify, and all this is in the assignment sheet, so you don't have to be writing this stuff down, right? And obviously, if you're watching the recording, you can rewind it or whatever. So then you identify what the person's relationship is to you. And this is important because you want to know, you want to indicate to the readers why you trust this person. Why is this person trustworthy to you? What is their ethos, right? You know, have you known this person for like all your life? Have you known this person, if this person maybe was a teacher at, you know, your high school, whatever, you know, have you known this person 3 or 4 years? You know, what's this person's character, so on and so forth, right? Why are they trustworthy? Okay. Then the next step is to describe the person, and again, to use the descriptive techniques that I've taught, that I talked about throughout the narrative process, right? In these meetings, you know, for a paragraph or so, so that your reader can get a sense of who that person is, you know, visually, right? You can also include photos, in fact, you know, but if you include a photo or multiple photos, you don't just stick a photo in something, right? Just like you wouldn't stick a piece of evidence in something, you have to give it context. So in other words, if you put a photo in an essay, you need to talk about and make reference to what's going on in that photo. Otherwise, that photo is just stuck in there and does nothing, you know. So keep that in mind. If you include a photo, which I recommend, you know, talk about what's going on in the photo, make reference to it, explain it, right? Okay, so after you do that, then you narrate the interview, right? And again, you don't put the whole interview in the paper. Just those points that you feel are key points that are relevant to your question, or this is the other possibility. Maybe your interview goes off and trails off into totally unexpected territory, and that's fabulous. Okay, because communication's organic, right? So if that happens, that's great, and you follow those threads, you know, in the narration of your interview. Okay, but you are telling the story of the interview. You are not putting the interview in there verbatim. Now, you are quoting from the interview when the quotations are significant. And just like with any other type of evidence, and I'll get more into this probably next week, right? In next week's meeting. When you're talking about any kind of evidence, the key point is anytime you introduce evidence, you also have to explicate or explain that evidence relative to the point that you're trying to make. If you don't do that, in essence, the evidence is useless, right? So if you introduce a quote or a paraphrase or something from your interview, why are you doing that? You know, what's significant or what's important about this particular piece from the interview, this particular exchange from the interview? What's important about that? What is that conveying to you? What do you want the audience to get across by having that in there? So, but again, you're not reproducing the whole interview. So again, and I mentioned this before, and in at least one person in her reflection mentioned that this was helpful. But when you're talking about any kind of narration, right? Think of yourself as a film director. Think, you know, that just like a film director, a writer is determining what's exactly on the page, exactly what the audience or the reader will see, or what the audience, the reader has to work with, in the same way, right, that a film director is determining exactly what the audience will see, you know, in a film. So think about that. And sometimes, you know, what's not said or what's not put on the page is just as evocative as potentially as what is. So it's all kind of relevant like that. But anyway, we can get more into that stuff later. But the idea is that you narrate that interview. And again, if you're in Professor Vega's class with the learning communities, you will also within yours, you'll probably have a couple of background paragraphs as well, talking about the nature of the career field this year or investigating, so that you can also integrate those sources that I was talking about. But you'll narrate the interview, and then concluding the piece, right? Concluding the essay, what you'll do is you will have several paragraphs of reflection. In other words, after this interview, right? What do you think about this? Do you still have the same opinion about the situation? What was revealed to you about what you were asking about initially? What, you know, or if you discovered something new in the process of the interview, what light does what you discovered shed on things? You know, what context does that put stuff in? How do you now feel about the person whom you're interviewing? Have you discovered a new aspect of that person? You know, things like that, right? That's how you would round out, you know, the profile. Again, everything I'm saying for the most part is in the profile project assignment sheet. It is also in the video that I included as well, talking about the you know, going through that assignment sheet. A couple of other points I want to bring up. Again, you know, you all who are on here right now, I'm kind of preaching to the choir, right? But because, you know, you're like on point for the most part. But make sure for the weekly reflections you are hitting 2 pages, right? As in, you know, 2 actual complete pages of reflection minimum. Okay, that is important. With on the profile project assignment sheet, there are a number of invention exercises, and just like with the last project, I'm not requiring you specifically to do those invention exercises in any order or in any, you know, organized fashion, but they're there and they're designed to help you come up with ideas and to craft your draft. Okay, so what I would recommend for the reflections in part is for you to actually engage in some of those invention exercises, so that you can then reflect on having done those invention exercises, which then, you know, generates more writing for your reflections, right? So you're actually accomplishing, you know, multiple goals at one time, right? You're writing your reflections, and you're also you know, you're also generating ideas for your essay. If y'all would excuse me, I've got to let my dog out before she, you know, messes on the floor or something. I will be right back. I really heartily apologize. And here's some of my DVD collection. I'm still here, folks. I'm just letting my dog out. All right. Okay. Sorry about that. And the big face just shows right up on the, okay, very much up close. Okay, all right. So yes, like I was saying, you know, make sure that you're hitting the 2-page mark on the reflections. Again, I heartily recommend engagement with the uh, invention exercises that are printed on the assignment sheet. When people talk about they don't have anything to write about or they can't think of any ideas, I don't know that they have thought about the invention exercises, right? So go there, you know, if you're having a really hard time, you know, look at some of those invention exercises. Of course, you can reach out to me and so on. Your key goal for this week, right, other than the reflection, of course, but also is to find, to figure out what you want to investigate, and then find someone who fits that, you know, that qualification, right? Who can talk to you about that, and also, you know, read through the sample essays, and so you can get a kind of feel of some of the stuff that some other students have done, and some of their work is quite nice. It's, you know, a lot of students really invested a lot of time in some of those projects, and for some people it becomes more than a mere, you know, school project, because for some people it's the first time that they've really had an opportunity as an adult or young adult to have an adult conversation about maybe something significant with, say, an older relative, you know. So it becomes important because it becomes kind of this, a threshold crossing, you know, like a rite of passage kind of thing. It doesn't have to be, right? This project doesn't have to be that super significant for you. It can, but what I'm saying is it can be, right? So, and, you know, I probably shouldn't do this, but I'm going to go ahead and extend another week the option to turn in stuff from early on in the semester through to you know, to now is for a late credit. If you hadn't turned it in, and I do this because there's COVID. Some people are still not, for whatever reason, not plugging in. And you know, it's strange out there. You know, like I've had to go into the clinic a few times for this particular condition that I have. It's not contagious or anything, but it's, you know, but anyway, so people are coming in for their free COVID tests, and there's no separate waiting area for the folks coming in for COVID tests, anything like that, you know. And so it's kind of like, you know, you're playing, you know, distancing calculation in your mind. Like, okay, how can I you know, how can I distance and get max distance from, you know, from such and such? You know, it's just we live in an odd we live in an odd time. You know, the ancient Chinese curse, which I'm sure you have heard, is may we live in interesting times, right? And we certainly do. We certainly live in interesting times. So, you know, unfortunately, so far, well, we've had a little bit of it. So adversity tends to breed creativity, right? So when shit just falls to, when stuff just falls to shit, that's when people get creative, and there tends to be like a creative revolution. So for example, in New York in the late 70s, you know, the city, well, the city was barely functioning at all, you know, but they cut all of the art and music programs in the schools. And so that actually gave birth to two very, very significant movements, one flowing into the other, one being the graffiti movement and the other being hip hop. Because the impetus for hip hop was, well, you're going to tell, you know, you're not going to give us instruments. You're not going to teach us how to use instruments. So, you know, we're going to take turntables and we're going to sing, you know, we're going to we're going to sample, you know, and do all that. And, and, and like, and initially in hip hop, if you know this, particularly East Coast hip hop, if you know the history of it, it was not about the MC, it was about the DJ. Because the idea was that creating music, the MC was like the hype man, like Flavor Flav, like you know, that was the original MCs were like that. And you know, of course, as the medium progressed, as the genre progressed, it became more and more about the MC and about the lyrics, and then you know, and so forth. But and of course, the whole MC idea or notion came out of number one. It came out of the black church, but it also, I mean, I'm talking about way back. I'm talking about from way back. It actually came from the black church, and then it went to James Brown, but and then on up to through to hip hop. But the point being, I do have a point, is that, you know, when people had fewer means, they figured out ways of doing different shit. And so for us, I mean, if you know, it's what's come out of all this would be like the Zoom communication and so forth. But I haven't seen so much so far the creation of art and anything like really provocative and interesting, like, you know, one would hope that a crisis like this would produce. I don't know, maybe it's too early. um, they are coming out with a second Borat movie, so I'm kind of you know, on Amazon Prime, so you know, I'm kind of in you know, anticipating that. So, you know, Borat movie. Also, Public Enemy did a new version of Fight the Power. So I mean, you got to, you know, hats off to Chuck D for that. But you know, see, Chuck D, you know, as far as you know, you can see why, you know, certain candidate, like speaking of the elections and like, you can see why certain candidates pick the vice presidential candidates they do, right? Because, you know, next to that vice presidential candidate, they look pretty freaking amazing. And I mean, Chuck D kind of is pretty great, but, you know, next to Flava Flav, he looks like Albert Einstein, you know. So, you know, that's what, you know, so for example, you had like George Bush Sr. and then Dan Quayle. Like next to Dan Quayle, George Bush Sr. looked like, you know, the greatest dude in the world, you know, so on and so forth. You know, but anyway, right? um uh so that's my thing. And, you know, we live in this strange time. Going back to my original point, I'm extending the turning in of late work for late credit another week to give you more options. All right. I have now talked, aside from my, you know, aside from my puppy poopy break that I took, I'm not pooping puppies. I took my puppy to poop. For those of you not following, yeah, I've been talking for like 35 minutes. So does anybody have any questions? Looking in the chat, looking in the chat, looking in the chat. Nope, I got a smiley face. Okay, so, nope, okay. One more thing. So I'm not required to do so, but I'm going to try to have your midterm grades out by the end of the week, which means I may or may not comment on all of the backlog of reflections. I may at some point just go through and score them. That doesn't mean I won't read them, because I will, but I may not comment on them. It just depends. I've got a lot of backlog, and I know it's not ideal, but what I want to say about midterm grades, and some of you may have heard this already, and this doesn't just go for my class, it goes for other classes as well. Midterm grades don't mean shit. Okay, they don't count for anything. Okay, what they do is their wake-up call. Okay, so for example, if you get your midterm grade in a class and you have a D, okay, that doesn't mean that you have a D for the semester. What that means is that at that given moment that professor calculated that score, you had a D. Okay, so if you're in that sort of situation, that's when you contact the professor and say, hey, what can I do to potentially bring up this score, right? Because it could entirely be possible for you to turn that D into a B by the end of the term, So when you get your midterm grades from whatever class, use that as an opportunity to just to kind of assess where you are. Again, with this class, key concepts turn into everything complete and everything on time. If you do that, you will, your average, quote unquote, average is 100%. You're good. It's when you start turning multiple things in late, or just not turning stuff in at all, that it begins to become a problem. But anyway, all right. No further questions or thoughts or anything. Again, I'm probably not going to hold a Tuesday meeting this week. So, all right. Okay. Have a great week, everybody. If you have any questions with regard to the, look at the chat again. There's a new thing. Okay. With regard to the profile or anything else, let me know, and I will see you all later on. Have a great day.